All right, good morning, everyone in America. This is Justin and Caden at Seeking Context. Seeking Context is a podcast where we explore the way our lives, careers, and beliefs have unfolded over time. And we look at how they fit in context of family and community and history itself. And today is the 10th episode that we're recording. And I'm decided to sort of set up the rest of 2021 in a set of 4 seasons for the podcast. And this is the end of season 1 with 10 episodes. So we're going to take 3 weeks off, and then we'll be back with another 10 episode season, trying to do 1 interview a week with interesting people that hopefully you'll find interesting too. And so for today's episode, Caden is actually going to interview me, and he's going to find out about my background, and I'm going to interview Caden about his background. Caden is a production assistant for the podcast, and we sort of came together serendipitously when his mother introduced us after seeing my request for finding somebody to work with. And we have overlapping family and history, even though we'd never met each other before a couple of months ago. And so we're going to use this opportunity to learn a little more about each other. And then if people discover the podcast and want to know about who we are, then we'll say, watch episode 10, season 1. So morning, Caden.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm good. How's it going? It's we're supposed to have this big dump of snow in Denver that will trap everybody here, and sky is falling.
Eastern
what the
wind.
Newscasters say.
Bring that moisture. Yeah, we've got plenty of rain here, so you can keep the snow, I guess.
All right, cool. And you are in Butler right now? Or are you in your dorm, or you're at your friend's house?
Yeah, no. So I'm in my dorm in El Dorado. I go to Butler Community College in this beautiful little spring break dorm.
All right. Is everybody off for spring break? You're the only person on campus?
I don't think I'm the only person here, but there's maybe a cumulative about 25 people. So it's
all right.
Very isolating.
All right, cool. Well, that's, I guess, why we were able to say, hey, how about 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning? There's nothing going on, huh?
Exactly.
All right.
And you're in Colorado, right?
I'm at my cousin Lynn Musgrave's house in Denver. It's in Lakewood, West Denver. So we're supposed to get between 1 foot and 2 feet of snow over the next couple of days. So I'll be out building forts and snowmen and snow angels.
Hey, I'm excited for you.
I guess you can start with your questions for me.
Sure. So we're both fairly connected with like our small town starts. And more specifically, we're both connected to Oakley, Kansas, of all places. And I guess I would start off by just wanting to know how was growing up in a small town and maybe going to high school in Oakley?
It was not bad. I had a pretty good childhood. I mean, my parents, Dave and Reggie, are very, loving, cool parents. So I had a good family life. And my experience, I thought the education in Oakley was pretty good. What I missed as like a high school student was a friend group. I never got in a clique, right? There were the Monument kids, and I think your dad was probably in the Monument kids sort of rat pack. And then there were the Oakley kids, and there were the sports kids. And I was a little geeky. I was bookish. I went out for sports, but I wasn't good at them. And I don't know, might have gotten a minute of playing time in high school basketball, 4 years. So I did my best. And so I was friendly with everyone, but didn't have that sort of, clique that you want and you desire. And I didn't get that until I got to college at the Air Force Academy. And then I found a friend group that we just were thick as thieves for the whole 4 years.
I feel like I've had almost the exact same experience. There was no, I wasn't part of the athletic kids. I went out for like track and stuff, but I also wasn't, towards more of the bookish kind of stuff. So I fell right in the middle, I think a lot like you did. From Oakley, you then moved to California?
No, I mean, I went directly from Oakley to the Air Force Academy.
Oh, okay.
So California came after my Air Force career. And I've been there for the last 7 years or 8 years. So it's been a big part of my life. But I went to the Air Force Academy for 4 years, then had, a 10, 12-year Air Force career that bounced me around, and then a couple of places before I landed in California.
So the Air Force Academy, that's pretty prestigious, as I understand. Like, not a lot of people are, saying they went into the Air Force Academy. What was, the requirements for that?
Is tough. You've got to do well in school. You got to have, extracurriculars, and you got to really want it. I remember the application. I worked so hard on that application and the essays, and you have to apply to the Air Force Academy. And I applied to the Air Force and to Army and to Navy, to all 3 service academies. I just wanted some adventure. I didn't hate Oakley, but I wanted to go somewhere else. And the academies seemed like the best adventure option out there. And at the same time, you have to apply to your senators and congressmen to get a nomination. And so it's this like dual process of applying to them. And they have committees. You don't actually meet with the senator. Typically, they have some committee that you go before, and you're interviewing. You're a 16-year-old kid, you're 17, and there's this panel of 10 people asking you questions, and they try to make the makeup of the academy, a geographic mix of people from around the country that are all, motivated towards, having some sort of a military career. And so it was very intense getting in, and it motivated you to take more advanced classes and things like that were helpful in, being able to survive the academics there, which are were pretty intense as well.
Man. So from there, you then spent your time in the Air Force, and where did that take you? Did you not commercially, but for, the Air Force itself?
It took me everywhere. It was the best thing ever. I went to pilot training after the Air Force Academy, but before that, I got accepted to get a master's degree in public policy at the University of Maryland. And so I did a 2-year degree, which was the best. I was getting paid. I was a second lieutenant in the Air Force, and they were paying for my college or for the education. And so I was rich, like everybody else in college is broke. Nobody gets a salary to go to college, and I did. And then I went to pilot training in Wichita Falls, Texas, followed by, I got an F-15. So I flew F-15s in training in Florida, and then at an active assignment in Virginia at Langley Air Force Base. And then I did for 3 years. And then I did 2 years serving in Germany as an air liaison officer with an Army unit, where, you'd kind of control air support for Army operations. And while I was there, I went to Iraq as part of the war. And then when I got done with that assignment, I went back into the F-15 and served in Japan in Okinawa. And that was just the best. Okinawa was so much fun. As a pilot anyway, and just a joyful sort of 3 years. And then I got this job to be the air liaison officer to Colombia, Bogota. It was this cool job, but at the same time I got accepted into business school, and it was this big crisis. What do I do? Do I get out of the Air Force and go do something else that will be really interesting, or do I take this really cool job? And I decided to kind of jump off the cliff and go to business school and try something different. And then I had, about 10 years of, work experience after that in just the regular sort of business world outside of the military. And that kind of brought me up today.
When in the Air Force, you went to all these different places. I want to know what's the best place to go, in the world.
The best place. So the most interesting place, I think, as a tourist, is Machu Picchu in Peru. It's mystical. It's beautiful. We don't know how they did it. We don't know how they built it. It was only 500 years ago that they built it, and the Spanish overlapped with the locals, but because of the Spanish flu and disease, like the local population that knew about Machu Picchu all died away, and it was like lost for a few hundred years before we discovered it in the modern era. And it's incredible just what that culture built in this time, and it's incredible that we don't really know about we don't know how they did it. So I thought that's the most interesting place. The coolest place in my Air Force career is there's this thing flying the F-15 up in Alaska called Star Wars Canyon, where you get to, after you do a mission, sometimes you get to drop down and do a low level where you're chasing another airplane and you're just popping over mountain ridges, and that's probably the coolest place I've ever been. And it, I guess, is rivaled by Iceland. There's an air base in Iceland that the F-15s we were protecting from the Russian bombers like for decades, for the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, and they've got these really cool giant hangars where you can only put one airplane in, and the walls are like 8 foot thick with these giant, like the wall rotates down and becomes part of the pavement to survive nuclear blasts and stuff. And Iceland is just a gorgeous, gorgeous place, and being able to fly all over that island in a single seat airplane and look at the icebergs and the other, just the kind of majestic scenery is a pretty cool, that's a nice fringe benefit of being an Air Force officer.
That's amazing. So after all of your flight experience and all of your Air Force experience, you then got out and you went into business school at Harvard, correct?
Yes.
So what was that like? So you've had to, well, first off, out of high school, you get into the Air Force Academy and you're like, that's not enough for me. I have to go to Harvard and be accepted into that.
Yeah, I certainly like when I went to the academies, I applied to all the academies, and when I went to business school, I applied to multiple business schools. Just okay, well, I'll see what the best ones are and see if I can get in. And I was bored as a pilot. Once I had done it for 10 years, I was like, okay, I get this. And I wanted to see what else was out there. I don't know. I get curious about other things. And it is a difficult decision because I was 10, 12 years into my career. And I left the military retirement on the table. Like, I don't have any retirement, and it's in a way. And I also didn't join the Guard, where like you can join the National Guard and you kind of still have your foot in. And I had this philosophy that like, no, I don't want to have this umbilical cord to a steady paycheck. I want to be forced to work really hard and try to do something more interesting. And there's been many years when I've regretted that because your peers, like my peers that have now retired from the Air Force, and they have second careers, but they're making $30,000, $40,000 a year for the rest of their life without doing anything. Wow. They earned it because of a 20-year service commitment, but I left that, and I think it has quickened my spirit to like try and do something else, because I don't have that safety net of being able to be like, I'll just screw around for a couple of years because I could. Wow. And so the Harvard experience was really rewarding. The people there are amazing. The thing that was interesting is like I was not the oldest person in my business school class, but I was 2 away. We were all within a few months of each other. I was 34 when I went into HBS, and I think most of the kids there were like 24 to 27. And so it felt strange because I was so much older than everybody. And and at that time, at that period, 10 years older, it seemed like a lot. And you have they just want to party, they're all there to get the education, but they're still young enough that they want to stay out until midnight or 1 or 2 a.m. I can't do these guys. I was really here. I really did kind of want to learn things. And, but the quality of the education is just outstanding. The teaching style, the Socratic method is super fun and super interesting. And I think it's really sort of refreshing to go back and do that again when you're 10 or 15 years out of your formal education. For me, it was fun. And the experience since then has been really interesting because those, classmates all go off to, a friend of mine founded Blue Apron, and a friend of mine founded Turo, the car rental company, and people are venture capitalists and they're consultants and investment bankers, and they are doing jobs that are pretty amazing, like prestigious jobs and everything. And it's very interesting to know people in that kind of sphere personally, because they are just normal people that happen to get these jobs that you don't think anybody actually does.
Wow. So from Harvard, you then went on to, you were part of a bunch of businesses and you founded your own.
Right.
Correct. And so what was kind of the timeline for that? It was just one after the other, or you stick with one for a while?
I didn't. It's hard to say. Because some of them I didn't stick with very long, and some of them I stuck with for a while. So I did a startup with a friend right out of business school, and it failed right away. So that was easy. And I had this job as a consultant at the Boston Consulting Group, and they're a big, prestigious consulting firm. And I got a job with them in New York and transferred that offer to San Francisco, and it was not a fit for me. Mm-hmm. Consulting is a very difficult job, and though they work 18-hour days and they're working on Sunday nights, and you're really very well paid, but you work extremely hard. And I looked forward like 5-10 years, and the people that become partners in those firms, they work just as hard. As you advance, you do not reduce your work hours. And I thought, I can't have left the fighter pilot world to become a consultant, just helping other people figure out how to fire their staff more efficiently or something. There's no consultants, actually, they help people. How do you start new businesses? How do you grow? And where do you find inefficiencies? But it wasn't something that I could really put my heart into. And so I left that job very quickly, and then kind of floundered for a little while, trying to find a job that I liked. And I ended up going to San Diego, and I got a job with this guy, Adam Waxman, that had this little business selling. He was a vendor for Costco, and he would sell these things he was making in China. He had this little line of laptop desks. He had some kind of sort of one-hit wonders that he was just consumer products that he would make for these big box retailers. And then when we got together, we started, putting some of those items online and then growing that business. And Adam ended up taking that business from just a few items to like 2,000 or 3,000 items that he sells on Amazon now, and then uses the learnings from all of those sales to take them back to some of his best items, to take them back to these big box retailers. And that was a great learning experience because I got to do sales. I was going to meetings with, these retailers, at Costco's headquarters and at Walmart's headquarters. And then I did sourcing. I went to India. We needed to produce the funny story about my biggest success with Adam is I had this profit sharing arrangement where things that we created together or that I created, I had an ownership stake in. And so that was my incentive because I took a really low base salary. And so we had this one big hit that came out of, like, I showed a picture of something we did not make. It was just an idea to this buyer at the end of a meeting at Costco. And the guy's like, I like that. Give me a sample of that. Let's see, we might be able to try that. And so this was I think the interview that I had with Joseph from India, like a week after that meeting, I flew to India to try and find a factory that could make the item that I showed that buyer, because we didn't make that. It was just an idea. And he didn't really know we didn't make it. And so I had to go find a factory, get samples made, ship them over. Then they decided to do a test order. Then I had to fly back to India, help the factory get up to speed, and do a test order. And then the next year we got a real order, and then the next order we got a real big order. And so it was like this 5-year saga of this idea that I just showed on a piece of paper to a really big order. And as Joseph said, we produced over 1 million of that item in like a 6-year period, and they're still making it. It's pretty cool.
Man, that's awesome.
And so that wasn't really a startup. I was working for Adam, but it was, in a way, it was just the two of us. And now he probably has like a 50-person team, and he moved that company to Texas. And after that, I did a couple. I tried to do a sort of similar import business that just had sort of middling success. And then I started a company called Upgrade Stay, which was focused, a travel startup where we were trying to do subscription hotels for pilots and flight attendants. And the UPS truck is driving by, and Lodi has successfully chased them away.
Good job. Keep the house safe.
So that was super fun, because that was an idea that I had, and worked with my co-founder on creating it from nothing. And unfortunately, COVID killed it dead. Like, there was no chance it was going to succeed. So once that happened, I had to figure out something new. And I was sort of unemployed and floundering for the first few months of the pandemic, and then decided to start a new business, another startup focused on helping organizations and churches with navigate all the technology challenges of the modern world. And then I decided to start a podcast, and here we are.
And well, so you mentioned you started the podcast. Is there an inspiration behind it? Did you watch a lot of, or listen to a lot of podcasts, and you're like, I can do that, and jump right on it?
No, that was not it. I do listen to podcasts. My favorite podcast of recent years is Ear Hustle, the podcast about they do interviews from prison, and they started it, like one of the guys that started it was in prison. And I really thought that just interesting insights into what it's like to be in prison, and what are these guys thinking of. And when you see all these, prisoners, they're philosophers. They're all thinking about what they did and how they can make it better. And so I liked that. But the inspiration for this podcast, I had to go back and I recorded like a live thing where I was thinking about it. And I was doing all of these interviews for Reach, which is the business on helping, churches with how to do better technology, how to do live streaming better, what kind of tech equipment should you have for your in-person experience and for online. As I interviewed, dozens of people about their experience, I discovered that I like interviewing people, and that people have really interesting stories about their lives. And that was really the inspiration, is a discovery of that I'm good at doing interviews, that I like doing interviews, and that everybody I've ever talked to is pretty interesting. And so if I can talk to people and other people find it interesting and want to listen, then that seems like a pretty cool career path, if it's something that can turn into, actually providing income, which would be great.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So that's kind of caught up to present day with the podcast. I have a, more philosophical question for you. Of if you had a biography or a memoir, what would be the title of it?
Probably Curiosity.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
not true.
Because I was thinking about that, about what would that be? Because I get interested in things, and then I go do something different. Mm-hmm. It's kind of been a theme, and I've been really fortunate. I think that's one of the reasons I enjoyed my Air Force career so much, is they move you every 3 years. You get to meet a whole bunch of new people, and you get to find out what it's like to do a different job. And so if I could live for 600 years, I think I would probably go to medical school and find out what it's like to be a doctor, and go to law school and find out what it's like to be an attorney, and I would want to go be a dealer in Las Vegas for a few years. I think that would be super fun because people that come to the tables are really interesting.
Mhm.
And so I think I'm just sort of interested in what it is like to be other people.
I get that. That's pretty admirable too, because I know a lot of people that are very happy and very content with their one thing that they have or that they enjoy, and so wanting to actually do more after you've kind of absorbed all you can is pretty admirable.
Well, it's scary sometimes. I've regretted. There are periods of time where I went from being very financially secure to having no money and no job and no prospects, and thinking I should have hung on to the one good thing I had. But once you go through the suffering and actually find a new path, then it's like, oh, thank God I did that. I would have regretted not trying.
Right.
But it's really hard to see that when it feels like you might not have another success. And as you get older, you push your 40s and 50s and 60s, your risk tolerance can sometimes drop a lot because you don't want to be poor when you're old.
Right.
And that's a very big fear in this country. And one of the things that's nice about like making changes and getting used to it is it's never been forced on me. I guess COVID did force me into a crisis situation because it killed my startup. But I was already, going in when you do a startup that it's probably going to fail. There's just the bell curve is the massive, most people fail. And so you have to be lucky, and you need to make sure that you don't think that you're just going to be successful, because most likely you won't. So I had that knowledge. Even though I didn't want it to come out that way.
Right. So a lot of what you do does surround about or encompass faith and religion, and then obviously it's a big part of your life, but other aspects of your life kind of could, in a way, not interfere, but kind of clash heads a little bit of just like simple things of like who you love or who you're attracted to. And I just wanted to know your stance or what your belief is on like sexuality affecting your faith, or a organized church or religion, how that affects you.
Well, for most of my adult life, I was probably an agnostic, if not, and that's, I think, certainly at times I've been an atheist. And I don't think I rebelled against the church because of like their positions on same-sex marriage or being gay. I think I give people kind of a pass on that in terms of like what my experience is that, I grew up as a gay kid in Oakley, Kansas. I never really experienced any sort of discrimination because I didn't even know about it myself, right? It just didn't even seem like that was an option. That wasn't something I ever even really considered because I didn't understand it. There's no, as far as you can observe, there's no gay people in that community. There wasn't in the 70s and 80s anyway.
Right.
That would come out. I think if you were, you just moved away. And it just, you knew that that doesn't fit in that environment. And so it was never anything said, but it was like sort of obvious and explicit that that's not, that's morally wrong. And the church was sort of part of that, but it's what everybody was taught. And when I look back at my life and I realized that I wasn't able to come to terms with my own sexuality until I was 26 years old, and I did it after I had succeeded at every goal that I set. I got into the Air Force Academy. I got a master's degree. I got an F-15, and now I'm kind of at the top of my game. And then I finally said, oh, maybe I can do something for myself and not do something for other people. And it's not like I set out to do this, but looking back, I think I needed to prove myself. I needed to prove some sort of masculine identity in order to have the courage to acknowledge to myself and eventually to other people that, I was different than the normal person. And so I give people a fair amount of time to come around and realize that, if you were taught that it was wrong and it's morally wrong, and that the Bible says that it's an abomination and there's various things, some of the text of which has been changed in the last 100 years, that actually didn't reflect the language that was written in like the ancient scriptures. But people were taught that it was wrong and that nobody challenged that. I kind of understand that, okay, that's what somebody taught you. And that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what God believes. Like, did God create people just to suffer, and reject? Is it just your group that they act as only a certain way? And so, there are my sort of approach to faith. And the reason that it's an important part of my life now is because of all the research I did for this business. I spoke with ministers, lay leaders, my parents, lots of relatives, and I discovered that way more people than I knew were people of the faith. They had very strong convictions in their belief in a God. Some of them are very different versions, right? They believe a certain way, and finding out why they came to understand that is very interesting to me. And finding out for other friends why they rejected faith is really interesting, because I know people who have been very injured by the church. Matthew had a friend in high school, or maybe early adult years, that owned a gay bar and died in a car crash. And the Catholic Church would not let his family hold a funeral. And so that's extremely hurtful. And I can see why that experience would cause somebody to say, F you, Catholic Church. I don't have anything to do with you for the rest of my life. If your version of God is going to punish a family and exclude them from honoring their child who died, why would I want to be part of that, be associated with the God that you believe in? Right. If that's how he approaches me, then I guess I'm not going to believe in him, or he can just go off. And so I never had an experience like that. I just knew that, like, some churches are accepting, some churches aren't. And, the church is a manifestation of people. Like, it's people interpreting scripture and deciding how they're going to practice. And that doesn't necessarily mean that's what the Spirit wants, right? There's hundreds of different interpretations. So I'm finding it very interesting to learn what people's experience are. And that in turn has caused me to, take a second look at, why did I think why am I an atheist? What caused me to think that? And should I be revisiting these thoughts? Because the people that I interview who do have deep faith convictions are also, a lot of them, very sophisticated people. And I think, my experience with sort of, the coastal elites, if you will, and the educated elites that I've been in context with a lot, I think there's this view of religious people as sort of backwards. They don't really get it. Like, that's all fairy tales. And when you get to know people that do have real strong faith convictions, they have a philosophical underpinning for it, and they also have personal sort of mystical experiences that inform them. And they can't prove those things, but they are not saying them because they are dumb or backwards. They're saying them because of their faith has helped them, and they're very content, and it brings joy in their community, and they serve each other in ways that lift each other up. And so it's been really, really interesting to interview people from so many different backgrounds. And I kind of got off the track of like how I reconcile. But for me, I don't really have to reconcile the fact that some churches reject same-sex marriage or even gays at all to be part of their religion. And that's fine. If that's what you believe, it is possible. I can say it is possible that God created gay people and they're all going to burn in hell, because that's wrong. I don't think that's what he had, but I mean, God gets to do what he wants to do. Right.
I guess he has that power.
Choice on what the rules are. He set it up, and I do think that whatever the setup was, it is probably something that is universal. He set it up 1 billion years ago, and we're figuring it out as we go. But the fact that some organized religion has been used for very bad things, the Crusades, the persecution, lots of religions have been treated women poorly or completely ignored them, and certainly the LGBT community has been rejected by many. But that doesn't mean that that God was intentionally doing that. That's people, and so I can separate those two,
right,
and try and find out, well, what is there? Is there a universal,
truth or
sort of truth, right?
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
or not, or is it all? Are we all fooling ourselves? Did we invent this idea in our own heads? There's some people that think that, and I like exploring it because we only have so much time, and then you're dead for billions of years. So if you can figure out anything about it, you got to figure it out now. If that's really what happens too, I think it's worthwhile exploring either way.
Right. That's just funny. You got about, a positive number of maybe 80 years to figure it out, and then it's over. So, right. You can try your best.
Yeah. And, there's a lot of teachings in the faith that think you have a lot more time than that. And
right.
But in this body, right?
Exactly.
You don't have that much time. So
exactly.
I think it's a worthwhile thing to explore.
Of course. So you spoke a bit on same-sex marriage, and I understand that you were one of the first people in California, or I don't know all the exact statistics, but to be married in California.
Not exactly, sort of.
Okay.
So it was like the Supreme Court ruling came down, and we got married like a week later. So that came down on like July 26th or June 26th or 7th, 2015. And then I got married on the 4th of July in 2015. California had legalized same-sex marriage previous to this.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
I wasn't there had been a lot before, but it was just very soon after the Supreme Court ruling came down. And that made it really cool because we had quotes from Justice, who's the Supreme Court justice that wrote the ruling? Not Stevens. Okay, I'm going to look this up.
Okay.
But
it's so strange to me. I feel like that was so long ago that was just an accepted thing, but it was less than a decade ago, 2015. It's just insane to me that it was just, that wasn't that long ago.
So modern, right? Well, and the states, the states approving it really had came about in the last 10 years for the widespread acceptance. It was a really big deal. It was really meaningful. And it was Justice Kennedy that wrote the ruling, and so we had this cool quote from him about marriage. What marriage is and how important it is in our society. Right. And it was really eye-opening to me to get married on how important that institution is, because I didn't really get it. I didn't care I'm definitely a free rider on the advancement of same-sex marriage as a benefit or a right for gay couples, because I was like, I had a friend says, why do you need marriage? Is it that important? Can't you have civil unions? And I'm like, I guess if you want marriage fine. Like I just didn't care. And I think because I didn't get it. Once you get married, it's different. You get better bedrooms when you go home to visit. I could tell you that. People treat you just differently. There's this level of respect because they know what a big deal it is to make that sort of a leap. And the ceremony is, I mean, we had 180 people there from all over the world. It's really neat. And so you don't do that when you get a boyfriend or a girlfriend, right?
Right.
When we're dating, we're moving in together, you know. Mm-hmm. When you do this public thing of making this commitment, there's something very powerful about doing it. And it was neat to be able to publicly acknowledge it. And I have a friend in Kansas, actually, he was saying that like, he's kind of jealous that I'm married because he's gay. And he was like, he has to come out all the time. Kansas is still, you know, not, it's fine that people are welcoming and friendly, but there's sort of an assumption that you're straight, I think.
Right.
And so he finds himself, you know, he farms and, you know, he's out, but not everybody knows. And so he has to come out and he's like, if he was just married, then people just know. He's like, and that is true. It is nice to stop the whole thing about like, oh, do these people know that I'm gay? Do I have to come out again? Right. It's just kind of, it gets tiring. Because, you know that some people, you know, don't approve or whatnot. And it's just like, you don't want to pretend to be somebody else. And so when you're married and you're married to a person of the same gender, people get it. You don't have to have any conversations.
I think it is a lot, for me at least. I grew up, and I think it has a lot to do with the internet, of like, even though I grew up in this small town, I still understood like the wide scope of what, you know, humans are. And they're not all, you know, wheat farmers or something. People are different. And so I think in our generation, especially, it is much more accepting, and it's just going to be more and more accepting as time goes on.
Yeah, that's really nice because it was, you know, the decision to acknowledge it in myself and then to actually take action was agonizing because because people in small towns and people from where I came from, they had no exposure. So they didn't have the exposure you did have was just, it was sort of like in the water. You knew that it was wrong. And so for me, essentially being a homophobic person that didn't even know I was gay because that's just how everybody was, that takes a long time. It took that long for me to figure it out when it's my own personal, you know, experience, that I can see how difficult that is for people that never had that exposure or were taught a certain thing. And now they're 65 and they're supposed to believe this other thing, you know, and they have sort of scriptural backing and religious teachings that back that up. That's hard to overcome. And I think that, you know, in the way it usually happens is they get exposed individually to somebody and discover that that person's a good person, right? That person is not the stereotypical, you know, image that was created in your mind when you were taught that it was wrong as a kid. Right. And reinforced it and taught your kids because that's just what everybody did. So.
Well, that kind of wraps up my list of questions I had for you.
All right. Well, you're working with me now, right. And
so ready.
You're a podcast production assistant. So I'm curious to find out about your background. But you're in college at Butler, and so what are you studying, and what's it like to be in college? The Air Force Academy was weird. It's a very different place. I never went to a regular college, but I imagine that college is different than it was 15 years ago. And I'm just curious about your experience.
Totally. So I'm at a Butler Community College in El Dorado. And I'm about in this spring, I should graduate with a mass communications degree. So that's like, you know, radio, TV kind of stuff. But I don't know it's basically right kind of what I'm doing now with you. Uh, and college, well, I can't really say that college, what the actual college experience is, because I'm at a 2-year. So I showed up last year, and it seemed kind of like a typical, the classrooms are smaller, more one-on-one, but there is a lot more opportunity of, like, I know other places. A part of my college program is I'm a theater performance scholar, so I'm in the theater shows and the plays. And I know in other big universities, there's a chance that you will never see the stage. And I'm happy to say that for every play there's been since I've been here, I've been in it. And so I think it is very nice that you are in as it is, a community college. You're part of a community that you can, you can walk. I can walk down the sidewalk outside if it wasn't spring break and probably know almost everyone who walks by. So compared to university, and especially with COVID, I'm pretty happy I picked a community college for the money and just the experience I have here.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you anticipate continuing after? Like, you've told me you planted to take a year off this when you finish in the spring here. Is your idea that after that year you go back to more school?
It really is. Right now I'm playing it by ear, because I was really just like, I do not want to go to university and then be on Zoom the whole time and like not learn anything. Well, yeah, I'd probably learn something, but I would spend a lot of money doing it. And so I was like, I'll take a year off and I'll see kind of how the world adapts and how it, either everyone's vaccinated or we all have COVID. And so, well, now, if you stay up on the news, there's new strains coming out of the virus, and people don't know if it'll even, if we'll have any kind of normal life for the next few years. So I'm like, I really don't know yet. So I'm really just I'm looking at science and how our world is adapting before I make any big decisions like that. But if everything does work out, I would love to continue on to university, either just in-state, maybe WSU or something, and just do something like I'm doing now with production or editing or some kind of video production.
Right. Cool. So how does dating work in 2021? Like, do people ask each other out on a date and like go to dinner or a movie? I mean, I don't know if it's pre-COVID, or, I remember talking to a friend on the East Coast. She was in college and she's like, it's just hookup apps. That's all that anybody's doing. And she's like, I don't know how to meet a person and date them because nobody does it. But that was somebody that lived in New York State. So I'm curious what your experience is.
Well, they're definitely right, because there is the difference between hookup culture and then actually like a relationship. And like actually trying to date someone. And before COVID, it is a little difficult because it is mostly dating apps. And if you want, you can go and swipe through all these people. I shouldn't say this because I've never actually been experienced with much dating apps, but as an outside looking in on it, you can see these people swiping through, and then they can maybe find one and they're like, I don't really just want to hook up. I want a full relationship with this. And you're like, good luck. You definitely are looking for a needle in the haystack there. But for more one-on-one interpersonal connections, the best place I've seen it is with an activity that you're in, especially in college. If you're like me, I see people that we're spending 6 to 8 hours of our day together all around this one subject that we're all interested in some way. And so that's where you find to date most people. As I see it, especially during COVID, you can't go out and do anything. So, it's mostly just kind of the watering hole kind of thing of gather where the people are, and hopefully you find a shared interest.
Right. So that's cool because you're practicing for these plays, and you guys are doing actual plays. You're like physically meeting. You're not just doing Zoom activities to do your sort of extracurriculars. Is that right?
Right. And that's another thing about, a community college too, is it's small enough that you are able to do some in-person things, and then kind of half of it's a more technology based. And especially for like theater, we are able to gather with sit around in a lobby with masks on and read through a script and, continue to try and work on it. And it's gone well. The first the first one was a fairly regular show with just some, we didn't have masks or anything, but we were pretty social distance, and we kind of based the show around that. And then the next two were filmed, and there was no audience, and we wore masks. And the first one we did, it was a Christmas Carol, and we were standing up to podiums, microphones like this, and we had a mask on, and I was Bob Cratchit reading something
Can I
about
watch this on the internet?
Yeah, well, you can hear it. It's on SoundCloud.
Okay, let's check this out.
I'll find you a link. I'm talking about my dying son, Tiny Tim, with a mask on and this black turtleneck. But and then the next one we did after that was, it sounds bad, but I forgot the title. But it was not a play. It was basically a collection of poems where one person at a time would go out on stage with their little set, and they would read this poem with like some kind of, some subtext to it of like, I'm a fisherman reading this poem, or I'm reading this around a campfire, or looking at stars. And that was pretty interesting to actually develop one-on-one, because it's not scene work. You're just basically giving a monologue. And that's about 14 kids doing 3 poems each. So that's around 40 some monologues that you have to do. It's a lot. So that was an interesting experience. And that's going to come to us at some point. And then finally, this last show of the semester is another regular show. And it's Sherwood, which is a Robin Hood style play. I guess it's just Robin Hood. And of all people, I'm Robin Hood. So
the lead.
I'm the lead. Yeah.
All right. Congrats.
So I'm pretty excited about that.
Will that be live streamed?
I think it'll be recorded and then put somewhere. But then there'll be like a limited viewing of of people in the audience. So it'll be somewhere.
Do you have aspirations of being some sort of an actor in your adult life?
Well, not particularly, no. If anything, maybe just like small stuff for, some
community,
like some community. Or I don't think I'd ever want to go to California or New York to do either television movies or Broadway.
Right.
I enjoy acting, but I feel something about that culture I just don't like. It's just very it seems kind of fake to me, and kind of like it's always, you're just trying to climb your way into your next role. And
gig work is stressful too. They're always like, gotta find a new job, gotta find a new one as soon as the play closes or the movie is over or the TV show ends. I think it's a stressful life.
Oh, definitely.
I was going to ask, so when your mom said, hey, maybe you should work with Caden, when I was looking for a production assistant, I Googled you, and there's Caden Runnalls on YouTube, which is doing fireside chats. And so your chats are like 90 minutes, up to one of them's 4 hours long.
Oh, yes.
It's just you. And I gotta say, people watch them. I don't know if you watched me on the internet before I called you, but I watched a couple of hours. So I was like, who is this person? And so it's actually very helpful to get to know somebody when that stuff is out there. I'm curious, what was the idea behind your fireside chats, and what are you doing when you're on your own YouTube channel? What are you having fun or what?
Well, definitely me getting into YouTube definitely started in high school with like my friend and I making the dumbest videos. We actually not me, but we were rewatching some of the old stuff, and I was like, man, this is embarrassing. And I bet if I watched the fireside chats that came out a few months ago, I'd also be like, wow, this is really embarrassing. But the fireside chat came around when COVID was at like max, infection in Kansas, and I wasn't going anywhere, and I wasn't really doing anything in the evenings, and I'm away from college, and I'm just kind of off in my own small town, and so I'm like, well, I haven't been talking to people, so how about I just talk to a camera for the next 4 hours outside? And I kind of occupied myself that summer with just doing yard work and running a bit. So I was outside all the time, and I'm like, I got a burned brush from that I've been cutting down around the fence line. So why not film it and talk to people about whatever the hell I want to talk about? So I think the first one was just me literally just saying whatever. I think the first one was about like dad advice, right? And so I think a lot of people look at me and they're like, here's a story. So in theater, people refer to me as the barbecue dad because you can find me with a cargo shorts and a flannel most of the time. and I'm the only one who like will look at someone's car if it's having problems, or so I'm kind of like the theater dad at some point. And I think I've always tried to be something like that because there's something, kind of noble about, not just being there when people need you and being able to have the resources to be like, maybe try this or maybe do this, or I can help you with this. And so I've always tried to be that person. So that kind of came out in the fireside chat, starting with that. And from there, I just did a few more. And then I went back to school.
Cool. Let's see. So then I watched them, and then we interviewed, and then you became part of the podcast. You've been helping. Great to have you working on it. Why did you want to, you seemed like you kind of jumped at the job, and I definitely jumped at hiring you. What do you like doing about it? Or what do you want to get out of working on a podcast like this?
Well, so I've literally, I've always wanted to do something like this. And I think one day I would love to be in your position where I can hire people and I can, make some kind of content. And that's basically out of high school. I'm like, I want to do something to make content for people to watch or consume. And so I was like, this is perfect. And I loved the idea. I remember watching the first few episodes you had, and I was like, I have those conversations all the time. The first one was about faith, and I have that conversation all the time. And the first few contained that, and also business and life. And I also like interacting with people. And so I really just wanted to get into the world of some kind of production and, hone my skills a little more, and also be paid to do it, which would be, and work with you, of course.
Yeah, well, they're all good reasons. I hope that I eventually start getting paid by this podcast.
Right.
So we're working on that. That's our goal for the summer. Is that I get income and then your income goes up.
That's what I'm working for. I'm making sure you get there.
All right, we got to get that Patreon.
Exactly.
Do you have any friends that have done Patreon?
I think a few, but I would have to ask around a bit more.
Well, it works, but we got to grow our audience. So
Right.
we'll ask. It's too early to ask people for money. They need to be interested in what we're saying first.
Exactly.
Um, what is your like? So you said you want to go into production and produce content. Do you have anything bigger than that? Like, okay, 5-10 years, I'd love to be doing something.
Well, to be honest, it is right around there. I'm more on, I like making more comedic kind of things. I like making people laugh. And so if one day I can have like some small studio, it doesn't need to be, the next Pixar, it doesn't need to be any large group, but maybe 10 people, and we can just make the content we want to make and then just do what we love to do. That would be the dream. But right now I'm just mostly just trying to do what I like to do. And as long as, like they say, as if you go to work and you love what you do, you don't work a day. And that's definitely, I felt that right before this job when I would wake up at like 5 a.m. to go to my last job. And I was like, I don't love doing this. So I'm working every time I wake up. So.
Right. Well, but you know what? Like, I bet. So like, if you were doing like a comedic production studio, would you thinking like you're doing commercials, you're creating content for companies that has some sort of humor angle to it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of people that you could probably start that right now. Okay.
Right. I probably could. And I've actually thought about it a bit. It's what like you say is you kind of need to grow your audience for people to, to trust exactly what you're doing.
Right.
And so you're right. You're giving me the drive that I do. I should just start making stuff and then putting it out there, kind of like the fireside chats, because they work somehow.
Yeah, I saw the one with your roommate. You guys had some comedic timing there. So yeah. And there's, if you can figure out how to make TikTok videos or Instagram videos or something, companies don't know how to do it. They don't know how to be funny because they're just like, it's very hard. It's hard to be authentic. They're like, we just want to sell sheets, but make it funny. And you're like, oh, anyway. So going back to like your a little bit of history of how we overlapped, like your parents divorced when you were pretty young, but then they remained close. And so I'm curious about like your background when you were growing up. Like, did you grow up in two households, and like how did, looking back, how did they handle co-parenting when as you viewed it as the little toddler?
Right. So they divorced when I was around 3. So I really don't remember it, but I was mostly with my mom. But I'm so, if you could say, blessed that they both were very amicable about, obviously custody of me. I think I don't remember the exact quote, but they always said it was like, our number one goal was like me, of like having a good relationship with me. And so they really did work really well with each other, and they both got remarried after. So I stay with my mom most of the time. Throughout the weeks I went to school near where she lived. And then on most weekends or every other weekend, I would be at my dad's. And also with holidays, it would be like maybe every other holiday, and then next year it'd flip around. And if we wanted to have a perfect world, I'd be like, yes, I would love that my parents were both together, but given what I was given, I probably got the best situation that many people don't get. And it also kind of worked out in a sense that my mom and I aren't super similar, but I was with her most of the time. But then for the short amount of time I was with my dad, we're very, very similar. And so we would kind of connect instantly. There wasn't like, obviously he's my dad, so I'm not going to be awkward around him, but it would, we could bounce off each other and joke around and talk about pretty deep things. And then get all of that experience at a very young age that I really enjoyed. And then, also be with my mom. So it really worked out for the best.
That's interesting. So because you only had limited amounts of time with your dad, you think he took like strategic action to make the most out of those moments?
I bet he did. And I actually remembered. So he lived in El Dorado for a while, which was a big reason why I went to school here, is because I knew the area. And I remember he would, every time I would come, he would make an effort to like go to a museum or go see something or go to the park and have those kind of like experiences. And back then I'd be like going to my dad's to like just hang out with him. But I bet in his head he had some strategic thought about like, I'm gonna make this the best weekend. Go back to school, not really like it, and then come back.
Right. Right.
Exactly.
So your mom and dad, they're in my high school class, but I don't think they got together. I think they got together after they were adults.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious, for me, I have a feeling other people might be curious. Like, do you know that history? Like, how did they end up crossing paths again as adults after, because I think they left Oakley like I did, and then somehow found each other later.
Yeah. So my dad left he went to the JUCO in Barton, the Great Bend, and it was some criminal justice. We're not sure. I tried to remember and talk to some people. We're not sure what the exact program was, but it was some kind of criminal justice before being like a police officer. And then my mom also went to school, and she kind of got into healthcare and bounced around a few places. But after, my dad kind of was in automotive and working as part managers in different places. And I'm not exactly sure. My mom was just working whatever job she could get. And then they both came back to Oakley, and my dad moved into the house right next to my mom's mom, or my grandma. And so, or before she moved back. And so my grandma and my dad would just kind of like see each other outside and talk to each other. And I'm pretty sure my grandma was like, that Jason fellow's really nice.
Like, you think she orchestrated it?
I think so. And I think they both were next to, they lived next to each other. And then they both decided to take an EMT class, which happened to be taught by my grandma. So
really?
Yeah. So
on your mom's side.
Right, on my mom's side.
Oh.
And so I bet there was a bit of connection there. But so I think after that they got married in like 97, and then after that I'm pretty sure they went to Wichita or Clearwater, and that's kind of when I came around.
Right. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So Jason, your dad, he passed away 3 years ago now, I think.
I believe so, 2018. So yeah.
Yeah. Were you able to be with him during the course of his illness?
Yeah. So it was around my sophomore year. So I obviously continued going to school, and it was definitely tough because, like I said, I was so much like him that it was kind of like the person who knows you the best and almost a reflection of yourself that's sick. And this is insane to think about, but I did not miss a day of high school. Every year I got 100% attendance certificate. I don't know what the hell that does for me now, but I can say it. So I was still going to school every day. And when I would see my dad, I didn't really go to a lot of like the procedures or any, like I didn't go to a lot of his like his chemo or anything. He was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, and I didn't go to a lot of that. But every time I'd see him, I was able to talk to him about that. And I think it was, if anything, it was so I guess if your parent dies at like a young age and it's sudden, I feel like that has to be the worst feeling ever, because I feel pretty lucky that I knew that I had a time frame to be like, time to absorb as much as I can and ask as much as I can, and just to know this person. And I'm very lucky that I feel like I did a really good job, because to this day, I don't like regret doing anything. Of course, I would love to see him, but I'm not like, dang it, I wish I would have asked him his favorite color.
Mhm.
I, I feel like I've got everything I could in the time I had, and I think I definitely benefited from that.
What did you ask him?
Well, I remember asking him a lot. One about what he thought would happen when he would pass, and he wasn't a deeply religious person. I think he had some kind of some kind of faith in something, but he was pretty scientific, and especially he had 14 years as a paramedic and in life team. So his life constantly evolved around death.
Mhm.
And I think I picked up on kind of that morbid humor too, because that's how he got through it. And I remember I would ask him like, so like, what do you think will happen? And he's like, well, I don't really care, because I don't like, it's you guys that have to deal with it. If nothing happens, nothing happens. And it's just like before you're born. Like, you don't remember what happened before you were conceived. And it's not like you were sad or you were upset. Uh, and if something does happen, he lived a pretty, altruistic life. And he definitely was very benevolent. So if some being was said that he was bad, then a lot of people are kind of screwed, because he did he did a
This is
lot
not
of good.
looking good for the rest of us.
Right. Not saying he was like Saint Teresa or anything, but like, he had to save countless lives. He delivered babies, and he, so if, even though he didn't attend a church, he was like, if I go somewhere, hopefully I did enough good. And I still hold to that. I'm not religious at all, but I'm still doing good, because one, I'm, not an a-hole, and I want to like help people out. But also, like, if something does happen, hopefully I did enough good that, divine cosmic judgment tells me that I did enough. Right.
Right. Like, I guess, do you have any, what did you learn from him facing things in the way that he did?
Well, he was always one to just kind of like battle. Obviously he knew when to call it quits, and that's also pretty like, it's insane to think about. He had to make that decision at one point where he goes, I don't want to do this anymore because of just quality of life. And I understood it, and I never felt bad, because he one of his big things is like, my goal is to see you graduate. And that was like 3 years. And I was like, that's not a lot. But he, in stage 4, that's a lot of, that's a lot of fighting.
Mhm.
But right around my junior years, when he was like, quality of life, I'm going to go on hospice. And then about a week or so later, he passed. And from that, I learned to just kind of, he was always telling me to just do stuff, not to, don't regret not doing anything.
Mhm.
And so he was always one to just, you only have a short amount of time, so be happy while you can, and don't take things seriously. I guess that would be the biggest thing. He didn't take anything too seriously. Obviously his work and everything, but when he had the opportunity, he would make light of a situation, because in the grand scheme of things we're just like super evolved monkeys on a rock. It's not like, if you take a step back, it's not that deep. Like, we make it really deep, and if we can, laugh a few times, I think that's what makes life worth living. To kind of go through the hard things, and then the next day you get a laugh about something.
Yeah. Was that the advice he gave you? Did he give you any, like, this is what you need to do with your life?
Oh,
sort of
well,
stuff?
I don't. No, I don't. He never gave me like the one quote, so I just kind of had to pick it up. it's kind of like, you know, I had to analyze what he's done. I remember, well, he didn't really give me any of that, the single, like, here's the plan, you know, go to Peru. No, he's, I remember just a quick story is when he was on hospice and he became nonverbal. So he couldn't speak, but he still obviously knew you were there. And I remember just from what I learned from him, I was like, I have the perfect thing to say. And obviously I have to speak to him. And so I went in, I'm like, Dad, I want you to know that we're about to play 1, 2, 3 Hush Puppies, and I'm going to kick your ass. And and I sat there for a good like 30 seconds, and I'm like, okay, I guess you win. And I could tell that he thought it was funny. So I was like, that was one of the biggest things for me. It was like, in the last few days of his life, I could make him laugh somehow with just playing 1, 2, 3 Hush Puppies. But I think the experience in general told me to, like, obviously care about the people you're around because they could be gone, but at the same time, don't take things so seriously because you don't have that much time and you could be gone.
Right.
So, yeah.
You shared, I saw on social media the other day, you shared the Velveeta commercial, and you said that your dad said that you're one of the Velveeta guys guarding the aisle of their prospect for their gold, their liquid gold. So is he saying you're the guy sitting down? Or I wish I was going to try and figure out, I'm sure we could have made it, put a link to it on this or something, but which character are you, or are you both of them?
I think I might be a mix of both, but I'm pretty sure he meant the one that was, he's got the big forehead and the big comb over, because I think I had a way longer hair, and he has that beard, and he's like, our territory goes all the way from the canned beans to the gluten-free stuffing. It's gluten, the stuffing. So,
I'd never seen that commercial.
I remember seeing it, and I was like, that's pretty funny. And then my dad's like, that's you. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? But yeah, that's a good memory I have. I kind of forgot about that until, I don't know what the hell brought it up, but I thought about it because it was his birthday this Wednesday. And so I was like, I think I should try to find a funny, experience. Yeah.
Well, your mom told me that you would remind me of your dad, and you really do.
I'm glad. So,
I'm sorry that, of course, that you lost your dad, but it's really neat to be with somebody when they kind of transition out, and I'm glad you got that experience. And it sounds like you had a pretty good experience throughout your life with a pretty cool guy.
Yeah, I definitely think so.
Yeah. He'd be proud, I'm sure.
I would hope so. If not, then I guess I'll find out.
Yeah, it'll be a while.
We hope.
Cool. Well, great to chat with you today.
It was.
And I guess we'll sign off, and we're going to be 3 weeks off, and then the podcast will be back. I guess it'll be early April.
Perfect. So, I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. Well, it's great to meet you. It's great to work with you. And I look forward to working with you, hopefully, many years to come.
You too, Justin.
All right. See you later.
See ya. Bye.